honestly, if you don't need to be here, you don't have to be.
Well, I had to let you in, but no.
Okay.
I'll just like mute myself, turn off my video, and then I have work stuff to do. So.
Yeah, no, you're good. Not a big deal. All right, let me grab that link. Right, I just posted in the channel. Ryan, we'll give him a couple minutes to hop in, and then we'll go ahead and start.
Okay.
Right, I just posted in the channel. Ryan, we'll give him a couple minutes to hop in, and then we'll go ahead and start. Okay. That's all good. Okay. GitHub.com. Inferno Hydra. Okay, merged. And copy Inferno Hydra's username. Ryan, I got an update about some dependency issue.
Yeah.
Do I need to do anything about that?
It's probably asking to update, right? Just approve it. I'll go check it out in a little bit, make sure everything still works.
Cool. All right. I also added you, so you can just you can just approve the pull request whenever. I don't know what it is.
Okay.
A Lodash thing, I think. Updates Lodash version from okay, you got it. Okay. All right. And even if people aren't watching live right now, they'll definitely be watching when we record it and publish it after. So.
Okay.
Cool. Ryan, if you want to go ahead, take it away. Hi everyone. This is Ryan Chhong. He's one of our retail organizers. He's a sophomore here at the University of Texas at Austin in the School of Computer Science, and he's going to be giving a quick workshop on authentication and how you can secure your users' data in the best way possible. All right, over to you, Ryan.
Okay. All right. Let me share my screen and then we're gonna start. Okay. All right. So authentication. All right. So what is authentication? So authentication is simply, technically speaking, the process or action of verifying the identity of a user or a process. And this is basically a nice, really fancy way of saying it makes sure that the right user gets to see the right data. After all, you don't want some random person seeing your data. That'd be kind of weird. And basically, you should use authentication mostly when users have some sort of unique, sensitive data that needs to be manipulated. For example, credit cards, or like, I don't know, like let's say you're on Amazon, you place an order. That'd be nice to be stored under your account as well. And however, it might not always be necessary to implement this. It's kind of a little tedious, and also, I feel like sometimes it's kind of like it's one of the things where you might not need it. And a good example of this is like a high score in an arcade. They always like in that case they usually just prompt you just for like your initials or whatever. And in that case, really making accounts like that isn't really necessary unless like you need some other sort of contact information from the user. And also recently nowadays, authentication is no longer super tied towards having a password. In some cases, you can use like your phone or like your email to log you in. But in this workshop, we're going to focus mostly on using a password because the code is a little easier to follow, and it's using passwords has been around for a while. So some basics you want to know. Pretty much besides just JavaScript things, it's just mostly what the REST API is. So the REST API is more or less how the server talks to the website or application and how the server sort of can respond back. And so basically how it works is there's a URL and that URL is called a method. And there's a lot of different HTTP methods, as you can see. There's like these are the main five, but honestly, I've only used the top two the most, so I'm just gonna only go through the top two. So a get method is used to grab resources from the server, and a post method is used to push new resources to the server. And these will be in the form of a URL. And yeah, that's pretty much it. These other three aren't going to be used in this workshop tutorial. And honestly, I don't really see these three as often as these first two. These first two are used like a ton. So, how is authentication implemented? There's two main methods. The first way is the session-based way. I'm going to zoom through the session-based way because it's kind of the old way. It's kind of been outdated for a while. And there's a couple of issues with the session-based authentication. So I'm just going to skip ahead for a little bit and demonstrate. So as you can see right here, as a sort of session is stored in memory, you see this part right here. That's a massive scalability issue because the larger amount of users you have, obviously you're going to run out of space, and that's a pretty massive issue. In addition, in my personal experience using this method, my Via usually on mobile devices bugs out. I'm not so sure why. It probably has to do something about the sessions not persisting properly. And finally, you can't access a session object if your API URL, so the URL that you're accessing the REST API from, is different from the one that's like rendering, which is kind of whack. And so instead, they've replaced it with this token-based system. So session-based. So we're just gonna zoom through this one real quick. Right here. Okay. So I'm using Express, Node, MongoDB, the usual. So pretty much everything up until here, this is pretty much all set up. This is just all set up for how we're gonna implement this authentication stuff. And the real stuff from this diagram, as you can see here, starts here. So this sets up the session, or cookies in this case. It uses cookies as for the session. This sets the cookies up. And so we're going to start with this blue arrow right here. This first blue arrow, host user login. So we're going to go to login right here. As you can see, what it does is it validates the login. So as you can see, the body is the username and password. So we're going to go through the body and we're going to make sure the username matches. In this case, we're using the email as the username. And we're going to make sure the hashes of the password matches. And if everything's matched and it's all fine and dandy, we're going to, as you can see here, the session is stored in server memory. That's what this right here is. So if everything is nice and fine and it works out fine, then we're going to store the session in memory. That's what this is right here. That's what this arrow is. And cookie to browser. So that red arrow would be the equivalent of this right here. So what this is this is an express middleware. It's essentially a function that sort of intercepts any of these requests right here. This sort of request, it basically intercepts these requests, does whatever you tell it to do, and then it processes the request in action. And so that's what this one is. This one pretty much persists a session. So the user, if you're logged in, you'll stay logged in. And if you need to access anything important, So in this case, profile, this is a sensitive sort of URL I created. So what it does is first it makes sure that you're actually logged in and it checks the cookie. So that's what this require login is. So require login, this is another middleware. And what this one does is it makes sure that the session and user ID are both valid. And if it's valid, you're good to go. You will go to the profile. Otherwise, you won't. It'll lock you out. It'll send an error. And this send response thing, since I'm using handlebars to render it because it's a little easier this way, instead of sending it, instead of doing like res response.json like here, I just pass it as a second argument. And if we go into here, as you can see, it'll render it for you. And we can just go look here. So this is all this code right here. This is what it looks like live. So I can just create a user. And so, oh, wow, look at that profile. Nice. Okay, now we kind of zoomed through that one because that's not what's used really anymore. Now here's the one that's used a lot. This token-based method. All right, token-based. So token-based is a little more involved on both sides. So again, Express, you got a lot of setup, but then we can start cooking. So login right here. So as you can see, this post user login, this arrow, this blue arrow is the same from the last thing. So it's going to go through the same process all over again, making sure the user exists and making sure that the hashes of the passwords match. But here's the main difference starting here. So here, instead of when the hash is here, so instead of before where we had this session sorted object, this is request.session, where we save the user ID. Instead here, what we do is we send a token. And this token, in this case, stores the user ID. You can make it whatever you want. And I just chose the user ID because it's a unique object, and I feel it's not the most sensitive data out there. It could be worse. And what it does is, as you can see in the JSON, it'll send the token back. And upon getting the token back, since this is React Native app, as you can see, there's if I can find the specific part right here. As you can see, actually not there. Shoot, here, right here. As you can see, it'll try to log in, and if it sees that a token has been sent, it stores the token locally in storage. Now, in a browser setting, the equivalent of this storage object right here, the equivalent of this is local storage, but it's not really the recommended way of doing it because potentially, someone can just inject JavaScript and then yoink your token, and then there goes your account. I'm not so sure how like enterprise people do it, but in a hackathon environment, I guess it's probably the fastest way of implementing it. It's a little safer on mobile devices because it's harder to inject JavaScript or sort of access this sort of data. And so yeah, that's what this whole mess of code is basically queries this server for this JWT token and then saves it. And if you want to access some sensitive information, so for example, if we go back here, so I rate this method called backwards. It does nothing special. It literally just takes your username and just turns it backwards and returns it. I just read it for proof of concept. So as you can see, you send in the token as part of your header. Usually you send it as part of your header. In this case, since it's a get method, I just chose it to be as part of the URL. This is very unsafe in a sort of desktop environment, like if you're to use a website, because someone can just grab your token from the URL. But since this is a mobile device, it's a lot safer because it's a lot harder to access these URL requests. And so, yeah, not the safest way of doing it, but in a pinch, especially for mobile, this will work just fine. Otherwise, if time permits, I can go find an example where it has in the headers. And what it does basically more or less is it verifies this token, make sure everything checks out, make sure this user actually exists and this token is valid, and it will spit out the user's information. As you can see here, I have this nice emulated Android phone, and I'm gonna go simulate this real quick. Wow, look at that. Your name and the name in reverse, which is sensitive data in this case. And that's pretty much it. All the code from this workshop can be found at this GitHub link. And yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Hunch, could we go ahead and stop the live stream?
Yeah, first let's wait a bit for
Oh yeah,
questions in case anyone has them.
give him a couple seconds to hop in and answer any questions people might have. So if you do have a question that you want Ryan to answer, go ahead and ask it right now when you see this. And otherwise, feel free, as always, to message me or any one of the organizers directly or Ryan directly, and they can we can pass that question on and get it answered to the best of our ability.
We'll also be posting this GitHub link both in Slack and in the description of this YouTube video when it goes up.
Oh, one last thing. Let me see if I can go find it in here. I'm going to find. I don't think I can find it.
Alrighty, looks like we're good. Everyone, thank you for coming and have a good night.